free to let us know where you're joining us from. That's always fun for us to get to see. We'll get started here in just a couple of minutes. Awesome. Arizona, Mississippi, Colorado. Oh man, we're all over. Minnesota, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Wyoming, Wisconsin. Sweet. Love to see people from all over. It's so fun. Texas. Hey, Tacoma. Georgia. Oh, it's so fun. Thanks, guys, for joining us. We so appreciate it. A couple people from Texas we've got in. We'll just wait till some more people start getting into, and then we'll plan to go pretty much at 1 on the dot for you guys. Costa Rica, that's awesome. Deep East Texas, awesome. Florida. Oh, wow, Iraq. Georgia deployed to Iraq. Very cool. Thanks for joining us, Alex.
Georgia, the country or state? I guess state.
I'm going to guess state, but Alex can clarify. Hey, Eastern Idaho, cool. Connecticut, so fun. We have quite a few people registered today, a little over 200 people. It looks like about 45 or so are logged in right now to the webinar, but we're going to get going here in a couple of seconds anyway, just so we can stay on time for everyone. And y'all should get a recording of this when it's all done. So if people end up coming in late, it's okay. You can catch the beginning later. Georgia, Wisconsin, from Korea. Oh my gosh, so cool. All right, well, it's 1 o'clock here. I don't want to keep you all waiting. Thank you so much for joining us. Good afternoon or evening or morning, depending on where you're coming to us from. My name is Diann P, and I'm the marketing director here at Wilderness Medical Staffing. I'll be moderating our discussion today. And just to give you a little bit of a brief overview of what we do before we get into our conversation today, we specialize in placing highly skilled locum tenens physicians, physician assistants, and nurse practitioners in rural and remote locations across Alaska, along with Montana, and our reach is also expanding into Wyoming, Washington, Idaho, and Colorado. Our mission as a company is rooted in providing critical health care to support often underserved areas, ensuring access to quality care where it's needed most, as we strive to improve lives in rural and remote communities. Before we begin today's discussion about what it's like to work in Alaska in rural and remote healthcare facilities, I'd like to take just a moment to introduce our panelists to you all. Each of them brings a wealth of experience and unique perspectives. So first, I'm going to introduce you all to Pete Davidson. Pete is a physician assistant, and he was also our 2023 Wilderness Medical Staffing Provider of the Year. Pete's medical journey began in high school, followed by service in the Marine Corps and a distinguished career in the U.S. Army. After completing his PA training with a focus in rural and underserved communities, Pete worked in trauma and surgery, including deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, and significant roles during the COVID-19 pandemic in New York City. Now retired from the military, Pete continues his passion for serving remote communities, working as a locum tenens PA in Alaska's Aleutian Peninsula. Thanks for joining us today, Pete.
Hello. Oh.
Pete, also on that caveat, one of Pete's first assignments, he played Santa Claus in the island he was stationed at, which was pretty cool. Maybe he can talk more about that a little later. Next up is Sarah Kelly. Sarah's a highly qualified and experienced nurse practitioner with a diverse background in emergency medicine, remote healthcare, and nursing education. She holds a Master of Science in Nursing with numerous postgraduate certifications. Sarah has worked in various healthcare settings across Illinois and Alaska, providing primary care, emergency medical treatment, and education. Sarah is a member of several professional organizations and has volunteered on medical missions in Haiti, Guatemala, and Nicaragua. Thank you for being with us today, Sarah.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And our next panelist is Diann Pearson. Diann is one of our Wilderness Medical Staffing Account Executives, and she has over 17 years of experience staffing medical providers in Alaska. She lived and worked in Fairbanks for over 16 years, so Diann brings invaluable firsthand knowledge of the state, which she uses to match talented providers with facilities in need. Her dedication ensures that working in remote Alaska is not just a job for providers, but a positive and rewarding adventure in medicine. And Diann's joining us today from Montana. Thanks for joining us, Diann.
You bet. Thanks for the opportunity.
Super excited to have you here. All right, well, first I'll briefly go over how the webinar will be structured, just so everyone who's joining knows what to expect. So we're going to begin with a panel discussion where I'll be asking our three guests a series of questions about their experiences working in rural and remote healthcare settings in Alaska. Throughout the discussion, you'll have the opportunities to submit questions you may have via the chat. So feel free in the same place where you guys are all saying hello and introducing yourselves and saying where your state is and where you're from. Feel free to go ahead and put questions into that chat if you would like. There's a chat option, and you may also see a question option at the top. Feel free to use either of those. Those are totally fine options for you. And then we also have several members of our Wilderness Medical Staffing team who are live in the chat as well. So as you start having questions about maybe things that the panelists are saying, we may end up kind of starting to answer them from our internal team, but we will have some time at the end to answer any questions that maybe didn't get a total resolve, or as many as we can. We might not get to all of them. We'll kind of play it by ear and see how this goes. So, okay, hopefully we're all ready. I know we're all excited on our end. So with that, we're going to dive into it. I'm going to start with Diann. And my question for you, Diann, is since you work closely with many of our clients across Alaska, could you share more about the demand for healthcare providers in rural Alaska and why these facilities often turn to locum tenens providers instead of hiring full-time providers?
Yep, absolutely. The reason that they turn to us is primarily because of staffing shortages, quite frankly. So availability of skilled providers, they're looking for, in our providers, they're looking for that flexibility to potentially fill holes in a schedule or fill a schedule full time. Also looking for providers that are oftentimes at a much higher level than their permanent staff. And then quite frankly, the dedication that our providers offer as well.
Awesome, thank you. Pete, given your experience working as a locum tenens PA in rural Alaska over the past few years, can you tell us what initially drew you to this type of work?
Yeah. So, hey, Kendall, what's up, man? So I went to AT Still and graduated in 2000. And the folks who are in Arizona know that AT Still is a university who targets underserved and rural communities. So all of my rotations were either outside of the Phoenix area in the Phoenix Indian Medical Center or in a remote community. So once I was through there and went back into the Army and eventually retired, what drew me to locums was really the ability to say no, the flexibility to spend time with my family at home when I want to be home, and then head out on assignment when there's assignment that fits my schedule here. This is a segue into Diann, but I am a 1099 employee, so, and being retired military, I do not need a 401k. I don't need health insurance from my employer, and I don't need vision or dental. So that's what drew me to locums, was basically the flexibility, and basically I have control of my life now.
Yeah, that's the case for a lot of the locum providers that we work with, is that flexibility ends up being a really big key component in kind of choosing to work this kind of lifestyle. Sarah, with your extensive career as a nurse practitioner, What inspired you to pursue locum tenens work, particularly in rural and remote areas, and particularly in Alaska?
I love that question. So hi to my ER people out there. I have worked in ER, EMS, flight nursing for 25 years. I loved my job. I worked for a great hospital, worked night shift, very, high acuity, main track ER, 4-hour, 5-hour, 6-hour waits. Just kind of a miserable experience for most people, and I loved it. Absolutely loved my job, people screaming at me, all this kind of stuff, intoxication, such a good job. So the company that I was working with, the contract group, changed, and I did not like the practices of the administration coming on, and I decided that I was going to leave. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but it wasn't going to be the same. These were colleagues that had become my best friends, and it was a really hard decision. So I started applying to different states because I figured, where else am I going to go? There wasn't a lot of places around me. And I actually got on an email group and some other groups, and I got an email from Tanner, and I ended up coming here and absolutely loved it. Once I got here, I kind of was able to breathe. And it was really an interesting realization that I was so burnt out that I didn't realize it when I was in it. But yeah, this is a great place to be. Alaska is wonderful.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. And Sarah just mentioned Tanner. Tanner's actually one of our WMSers. He's a recruiter with us. He's actually in the chat as well and already introduced himself, I saw earlier. So if you have questions on the recruiting side of things, feel free to ask and he can help you out. Going back to Diann, can you help to describe what a solo provider site is in Alaska? We work at a lot of solo provider sites there. So for those kinds of sites, what type of emergency medicine provider will typically succeed at solo provider sites, rural and remote facilities in Alaska?
Well, I think both Pete and Sarah could probably jump in on this one since they both have worked a lot.
I'm there right now.
Yeah, exactly. Sarah is on an assignment. So if something medically comes in and she has to leave, priorities have to take over.
That's right. So please jump in. But basically, when you're sent to a solo provider site, you're a one-man band. You are running that clinic completely alone. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you might have a health aide for assistance or a desk person, and a lot of times you don't. So you're doing everything from patient care to admin work to daily maintenance. You're, driving the ambulance or, the makeshift ambulance. And I think what makes a person that is successful in that type of position is someone that is adventurous, of course, and extremely confident in their skill set. They know that they can handle anything. They have the ability to think outside the box and think on their feet.
Perfect. So speaking of that, I'll keep it on you, Diann, and Pete and Sarah, feel free to chime in here as well. When you're kind of prepping those providers to go out for an assignment in Alaska, what are some of those main things that they need to know about?
Well, I try to tell providers everything I know. And of course, things change. So we can't, predict everything. But, we'll start with answering general questions, give advice on how to pack. Many of these places that our providers go, you have to bring your food with you. Sometimes you have to bring your water with you. If I know of any safety issues, you can see by Sarah's picture, those cuddly things do exist.
They're adorable.
Yeah, exactly. And they're real friendly when they have cubs. So, things like that if we've heard about, an issue with wildlife in the area, we'd let our providers know. Another thing too that I think we always have to keep in mind is we remind providers that we're a guest in these communities, and always reminding providers just to, be flexible. Don't go in with the idea that, you're going to have all the amenities it from home. But just remember, it's an adventure and it's an experience that most people don't have the privilege to have.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Peter,
can I add to that?
Yeah,
So,
I was going to ask you that.
maybe we're going to ask him first.
Go ahead.
When I get to a site, the first thing is who's the oldest, who's the youngest, who's pregnant, who has medical issues, and what is going to do and what's going to eat me. So that's pretty much.
Right.
After that, I'm fine.
Good tips. Good tips. Pete, would you like to add something?
The unique considerations of a locum's position.
Sure. Sure. Just kind of prepping for assignment. Yeah.
Yeah. So look, you're a 1099. So your DEA, your state license, your Alaska makes you get a business license. Those are all on you. So you've got to have those in play prior to coming up here. With the DEA, you have to have for PAs anyway, you have to have a supervising physician already set up. So Wilderness does help with that. And so does the tribal health organization who you're working with will also help you. But there's steps and you're dealing with the government. So, I mean, you can't progress to step C without completing A and B. That was the biggest hang up for me, was getting the DEA and the state license and the business license all lined up together.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Our team always really tries to help providers with that as much as possible, but every state has different requirements. So we try to just help you through whatever state you're kind of interested in working with and kind of getting you through that process. The different facilities have different requirements for credentialing and all of that. So we like to just communicate with people. Diann, you can add to this probably a little bit better than I'm able to speak to it, but just preparing people the best that we can in terms of paperwork and documentation and all of the things that Pete's talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely correct. And we do have an extremely talented team of operations associates that can help every step of the way. They're very well versed in what's required for each state and each assignment. So we won't leave it all up to you and say, hey, have fun, figure it out. We're there for you every step of the way.
Yeah, I think we'll talk about that a little bit more coming up here as well. And we do actually have a couple ops people on our team. So if you have questions about kind of the paperwork part of it or kind of the credentialing part of it or whatever, we've got people in the chat who can help you out as well. So Sarah and Pete, this one's for you. Since both of you have firsthand experience working in a few of the smaller communities in Alaska, what are a few things that stand out to you that are unique that providers should know before considering working there? Sarah, I'll have you go first.
Go back to like what could kill me or what could eat me. There is a lot of like natural things that could happen. Not that they're going to happen, but there is a risk. There's active volcanoes, tsunamis, earthquakes, greater than 100-mile-an-hour winds. Sorry, I have to look at this, my ADHD here. Avalanches, bears, wolves, moose that will get you. So you want to know about that going in. We had to collect ash samples at one of the volcanoes that was erupting one time, which is actually kind of funny. Unique travel. So if you don't like small planes, probably not the right place for you to be because you're going to be in a small plane. Sometimes it's a 2-seater plane to go different places, just everything. Weather can strand you. I've been stranded. I think the most is just 4 days. And I was in a village where one of the nurse practitioners was actually stranded for 12 days because the weather was so bad that a plane could not get in, which also is an issue when you have patients that are really sick, meaning the patients can't get out. I'm probably going to answer yours too, Pete. There may not be police or VPSO, village public safety officer. So if there's something big that happens, you have to call the Alaska State Troopers, and it may take them a couple days or more to get there. So there's a lot to know.
Great, thank you so much. Pete, anything you'd like to add about some of the things that stand out that are kind of unique in some of these smaller areas that you've worked?
Yeah, so most of my clinics have been solo site, meaning I'm the only provider there. I'm the only medical person on the island. So as Diann was saying earlier, yeah, I was in charge of doing the medical reconciliation and the narcotics count at the end of the month and sending that in. All of the vaccine temperature checks daily. Anything that had to do with radiology, I shoot my own x-rays, I draw my own blood, my patient's blood, and I run their labs for them. Casting, splinting, suturing, EKGs. You got to be able to know how to do that because you're the only one there who are on the island and understand what's going on. The majority of my clinics are the villages I go to, 40, 50 people year-round residents, mostly Alaska natives. And then there's some that have hunting lodges on the site, or they have a cannery who floats in 7-8 months out of the year and bring limited medical facilities and providers with them. So they lean on you hard for those ancillary services. And if it's something more than just a cold mole or itchy hole, you've got to call for the medevac and you've got to arrange for the higher level of care. And really, they just put that onus on you to get that person out. And usually they are TCN or third country national on those fishing vessels. And you have to work with insurance and with the medevac company, getting them signed up for the air ambulance service and those sorts of things. Your uniform is usually some cold weather boots, some insulated pants, a Gore-Tex jacket, and some sort of head covering or ski cap. You're not going to get the Mackinac peaches from Oregon 2 weeks out of the year, and you're very limited on fresh fruit and vegetables in the stores. You're getting frozen or canned or prepackaged stuff mostly.
There's no store where I'm at right now.
You do have a store where you are, Sarah? Is that what you said?
No.
Oh, you don't. Okay.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning that what Pete and Sarah are describing are very remote sites in Alaska. We staff sites all over Alaska, from the very far north to the very far south, and everything in between. So if doing something like this that Pete and Sarah are doing in these remote places is not for you, I'm sure we have other positions that would be, a lot tamer, so to speak. On the road system, have amenities, have a Walmart, have a Fred Meyer, restaurants, grocery stores. So don't think that this is all we do. Sarah and Pete are at the very top of their game in working in these solo sites. But we offer positions in many, many locations.
Yeah, that's a great point. Sometimes we also get positions. I think we might have a couple on the website now for kind of more urban areas in Alaska as well, just depending on kind of what your interests are, skill sets, and all that kind of stuff. So we try to kind of have something for everyone as much as we can, I guess. Now kind of talking about, for Sarah and Pete, building kind of on your experiences in the types of communities where you've worked, I want to talk a little bit about cultural differences that you might provide in Alaska, since there's such a rich diversity of communities and cultures in that state. How do you adapt to cultural differences if you have to? And what should providers be prepared for when working in different areas throughout Alaska? Sarah, I'll have you take this one first again.
So as far as, like Diann said, be respectful. I've actually heard other people in the community, people that are coming in, and we have weather issues, we have medevac issues, and they'll say to someone, well, why do you even work here? Or why do you even live here if it's that bad? Like, like if you can't, get to a hospital or something like that, which is, pretty rude. So just be respectful. I've worked for 5 different, tribal health organizations. I've been to 7 villages, and there's only 1 I haven't repeated. So, I mean, it's awesome. Some of the things that I've seen, I've been invited to carnivals. They actually just had a carnival here last week, and someone paid for me to be in detention for 5 minutes. So, got a name there going for myself. You're going to hear just amazing stories. I had an elder walk in, and he just said something. I had no idea, what he said. I'm bad hearing anyway. And he had spoke, his native language. And he told me he is the last person in their village that's fluent. And so they're trying to do, work with the kids and work with, older or just everybody in the community to kind of, get them back into that. I had a patient that took care of their family, and they invited me back to their home, and I got to see their dog sled team, which was super cool. So they're competing with a dog sled. I've met people all over the place, and it's just, everyone's been awesome, which coming into facilities, and they've seen so many people coming in that it may take them a little bit to kind of get to open up to you, because they may have seen 10 providers in the last year. And so you have to be, know that, if they're quiet or something like that at first. So
that's awesome. Thank you. Pete, what kind of insights do you have about working kind of with the different communities that you've had an opportunity to work in?
They're really not different. I mean, patients are patients, and the biggest difference in the communities I'm in is that I'm not an NPC or a non-playable character, man. I am one of the main foci of the community, being the only medical provider there. They know that I'm on call 24/7, unfortunately, but they don't abuse it. The cultural and the cultural differences, I did call Mount Denali McKinley one time, and I pretty much got slapped with that. And then I also called Columbus Day. I called it Columbus Day and not Indigenous Peoples Day, and they kind of took offense to that. But that's just a culture thing in Alaska. They're very proud of their heritage, and they are trying to keep the old ways alive, and they are trying to be focusing on their history. In fact, one of the main clinic I go to now is an integral part of World War II. It has a very long runway. And there is one person who does not live on the island, but he is working with the Library of Congress and with politicians in Anchorage to publish and keep a memory of what this installation did during the Pacific Campaign of World War II.
It's really cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that input. And we're getting some good questions in on the chat. So I'm just kind of putting a pin on them for now, so we can circle back to them a little bit later and get into a little bit more detail on a couple of those, just kind of follow-ups to some of the things that our panelists have already kind of talked about. Sarah, how have you found working in remote areas in Alaska different than some of the more urban areas that you've worked? Maybe things we haven't kind of touched on quite yet.
Well, once you work in Alaska, your view on airports and gas stations is completely different. So that's what I think. It's like, oh, that's an airport. For the most part, the patients are the same. I have taken care of 3 dogs. It's completely random. One of them I actually had to consult with a vet. But there are limited resources. You may be someplace that doesn't have an IV pump, have a ventilator, have a lot of the medications that you're used to having. You may only have one type or one type of a class of a medication that you have used. The formulary is pretty similar all across Alaska. Most organizations are using one of the big top player pharmacies in the state. Like Peter talked about, solo provider, you might be the one doing the x-rays. You probably are the one doing the x-rays and the labs. And the tube station is really different, because I'm sending my labs today in the tube station, which is the tube of the fuselage of an airplane. So I took care of, or I've triaged, talked with captains on crab boats out in the middle of the Bering Sea. So that's interesting, so that you can give them advice, because the captain sometimes is the only person that has any kind of medical training. They even can suture. There's some bacteria that are specific for Alaska, but most of the patients are really, the medevacs and everything I had are completely normal, lower 48. There's no big, bear attacks, anything like that I've had. So not to say it doesn't happen, but I haven't had anything like that.
To follow up on one thing you were talking about, I'm just kind of watching the chat here. And one of the questions that came up was for providers who maybe don't know how to do the x-ray portion of this. Do you guys have any pointers or tips on how to get more experience with being able to do some of these solo provider things if they were to want to do that in the future?
As far as that, you're not put on a solo site. You know, you're never going to go first time on a solo site. You're going to go someplace that has at least 2 providers. Diann will make sure that that happens. We'll go this way. But they will talk to you. You'll work with health aid practitioners. There's, you know, videos, YouTube videos, everything like that. It's actually not that difficult. It's harder, I think, to get the labs ready to go on the plane than it is the x-ray sometimes. You're just putting in the orders, so because it's all Cerner. But
yeah, that's a great point. Diann, did you want to add anything else to that, just in terms of like kind of matching? We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit if we want to wait.
Yeah, I'll expand on that a little bit later. But yeah, Sarah's exactly right. Is we really try hard to make sure that a provider is going to a location that matches their skill set. We never, ever want to put somebody in a position where they are uncomfortable and working beyond their skill level. So just know that. And I'll explain a little bit later kind of our vetting process and how we get to that point.
Yeah. Diann, still kind of for you, do you end up kind of running into any challenges in finding kind of the right providers for some of these types of very specific assignments?
You know, no, quite frankly, because, well, I mean, availability always plays into this, of course, but our team, how we vet providers is through a series of levels, quite frankly. And so it's not just the opinion of one person. It starts, you know, with our recruiting team, and they're going to do things like reference checks and background checks and skills, and quite frankly, a good thorough interview to gather a lot of information. You know, from there, a provider will move on to speak to our founder, who is also our CMO. And she has a very candid conversation with every provider that comes on board with WMS. And she's got a wealth of experience living and working in Alaska herself for many years. And, you know, and she talks about skills, and she talks about the places we staff, and, you know, really vets that provider even further, once again, to make sure we're never putting somebody in a place where that's beyond their comfort and skill level. And then finally, it's up to me and my fellow account executives to speak to providers personally about the jobs that they're interested in. And we give them the good, the bad, the ugly. You know, we disclose everything. We're as honest as we can be. We would rather have somebody say, no, that's not for me. That's fine. We've got plenty of other jobs to offer.
Yeah.
Diann actually called me one day and said, quote, I don't want to be a mother hen, but
sounds about right. Pete, kind of going off of that same question, are there any additional kind of skills that providers need to have to be successful on assignments? And I think that could be either solo provider or maybe more general kind of family med, urgent care type positions, but especially for NPs, PAs, any specific skills that you'd recommend providers go into this for sure having on their CV?
I think you have to be strong in primary care and emergency medicine. Yeah, but the 3 A's, obviously, you have to be available, affable, and able, you know, but I think you have to add in a 4th, and that's adaptable, especially with travel plans. Sarah said it, you get stuck in someplace, some lady was stuck for 12 days. And guess what? This isn't prison, and you get good time for that. If you have your scheduled rotation in 3 weeks and you have 12 days of that is waiting for an airplane out, you don't get 12 days on the back end. They're expecting you back within that 3-week break. So yeah, I'd say you have to be very, very I'm adaptable with that. Also, you have to be self-reliant. I'd say know how to cook. You're not always going to have, H&H Bagel down the street. So you got to be able to cook and provide for yourself and live independently. Anticipate, know when things can go sideways and how quickly they can go sideways, and realize that the enemy gets a vote. And sometimes that is weather. A lot of the times it's weather and capability. Where I'm at is with the medevacs, you also have to worry and really take into consideration their availability, and also their need and their crew rest and all the other things that you worry about with aviation. Sometimes they can't break those minimums. Where I'm at is a BLS plus clinic. We got about 10 minutes of CPR with me before I tire out. And even if I get ROSC, I mean, the golden hour doesn't exist. So I can't do PCI. I can't do some of the push TPA or thrombolytics. I can keep you alive, cool you down, and then try to get you out as fast as possible. But normally that's no earlier than 3 or 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And then consult early. There are a bunch of folks who will help you with via VTC, video teleconference, and they're always available at Anchorage. And the patient transfer center is also great. They're the ones who coordinate the medevac for you.
Perfect. Sarah, did you want to add anything else that Pete didn't maybe touch on for skills at all, or Diann, either of you have any more to comment on that?
I was going to do the next, like when we're talking about.
Yeah, sure.
The next things that we talk about that we mentioned.
Sure. So one thing I wanted to talk to Sarah about in particular, and Pete definitely has experience with this as well, but kind of what happens when a patient needs a higher level of care? How does that work in Alaska? And how does it specifically work in kind of those really rural areas that you guys both staff?
So this is absolutely my favorite question because everyone always asks me this, and I saw a few people ask this on the board. There's a very detailed story on the stories from the field that I wrote, or that we did a presentation about. But pretty much most of the villages are not on the road system. So if you don't know what that means that there's no road to get from that village to the main hub of Alaska, which is usually Anchorage. So you can only get out of that hub or that village by plane or by boat. And so that limits a lot, especially when the weather is bad. So when a patient comes in, a sick patient, you need to just pretty much decide right then if the patient's going to need to go out. If you think, oh, maybe I'll wait till this, no, you've already lost your window, because it takes, sometimes 3 hours just to get from your village to Anchorage, or more if you're flying directly. And it's going to take, longer if the weather's bad and that kind of stuff. So once you have your patient, you're going to transfer. It's just like a patient lower 48, you're going to call the doc. You're going to arrange, call the transfer services. They're going to try and get a plane from one of the multiple medevac companies. They're planes and not helicopters for the most part. Sometimes they're jets if it's far enough away. And then they have to check weather. So if weather's bad, then they don't go. They don't come, and get you. And a lot of these villages have runways that are dirt, unpaved. One of them that I've been at, if it rains too hard, it gets so saturated that the planes can't land because they're worried about the landing gear actually breaking off. Most of them won't fly at night because there's no lights. And so then if the patient's really, really sick, then you get a hold of the Coast Guard and hope that they can take the patient to a bigger airport, sometimes where Pete is hanging out, and can take your patient there. If the patient's really sick and they don't have a medical staff, they only have a swimmer that knows a little bit about medicine, then if it's a multiple provider clinic, then that provider will go with the Coast Guard to the better airport, and this is by helicopter, and then the medevac plane sits there and takes them to the hospital. I had a situation where The medevac helicopter could not get there. We were delayed multiple hours because it was over 70-mile-an-hour winds and they couldn't get the hangar doors open. So I've seen 110-mile-an-hour winds, but and so after 20-something hours, they were finally able to get the helicopter to land at the village that I was at. And I went by helicopter to where Pete was at, and the patient got worse. And when we landed, of course, there's, 60, 70-mile-an-hour winds, and the helicopter is still running, of course, and they opened the door and all my supplies flew out of the helicopter. And so I start yelling for Pete, and you guys know that I was yelling for Pete because everything was gone. Well, they brought me some other guy that must have been Pete, but it was not my Pete. And so we finally got Pete, and we got the patient. We actually got into a C-130 because the medevac planes couldn't get there. And so I rode a C-130 into Anchorage. But that was the third time I'd been in a Coast Guard helicopter. So it's been really cool.
Yeah, Sarah has some really cool experiences. Maybe we can share some of her photos out again on our on maybe some of our social feeds or something to show some of her kind of Coast Guard helicopter shots that she's taken when they've landed in different places.
Oh, and imagine that it's a helicopter in really high winds. So it's not really like this nice cruising. You get to look out. Like one time they're like, okay, guys, we're going to fly under the fog. And I'm like, that's not what we did in civilian helicopters.
Yeah, it sounds a little dodgier for sure.
Deanna, I think we may have a few eyes popping out with people that are listening to this webinar. Please understand that, this is not an everyday occurrence. I mean, it's most of what, or a lot of what our providers do in clinics is, primary care. And we're always looking for providers that are very, very well-rounded, not too heavy in emergency, but not all just, family practice either. So if you can really, we look for provider, the ideal provider is one that can do quite a bit. You can see patients from birth to geriatric. And, women's health is huge in the villages too. If you can hone your skills on women's health, and as you've heard, emergency skills are very important. But again, well-rounded, because a lot of what, our providers do is clinic 8 to 5.
Yeah, that's right. And that really ties in kind of with the next question I was going to ask you specifically, Diann, because we're one staffing agency. We very well understand that, especially as a locum tenens, you can, and many of the providers that we work with as well, work with multiple agencies. And same goes for our clients, where they may work with different agencies for different things, just depending on specialties. We primarily staff rural and remote. So, that's kind of our niche that we end up fitting into. So kind of when you're working to make that match, is there anything else that you could add, Diann, about kind of how you make that match between what the clients need and the correct provider for those assignments? I know we've talked about this a little bit, but just if there's anything else you want to speak to for that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think in everything I just mentioned a minute ago, it is very important, but also having the heart for this kind of work is extremely important. Wanting to do this, Alaska pays very well, but it can't be the only reason that you go, because as things that both Pete and Sarah have mentioned, it's tough work. It's not for everybody. So your heart really has to be in this, as well as your skills and your mindset.
Yeah, I think that's great. Thank you, Diann. For Pete and Sarah, this next one's for you. What kind of personal qualities, particularly, we've talked a lot about kind of the professional skills, but feel free to touch on that a little bit more, but more kind of personal qualities do you think are essential for success in rural and remote emergency medicine? And Pete, you did touch on this a little bit, but just if there's anything else you'd like to add, I'd like to give you a chance to here. I'll have Pete go first on this one.
Yeah, and just to backtrack to what Diann said, is like, just read the job description. If it doesn't fit your skill set, then don't apply for it. Like, there's some who are heavy OB and heavy peds. no, thank you. That's not for me. But you know what? Send me far forward to the one where you need heavy emergency skills. So anywho, so personal qualities, I think humility. And then when I was on the interview with Mary Ellen Doty, the chief medical officer, I was like, she's like, tell me what's your best quality and your worst quality. I said, my best quality is humility, and the worst quality is telling people about it. But honestly, you have to be humble, and you have to know when to ask for help. That's one of the big ones. Be comfortable with being alone, because both in the clinic and in your housing, you always have community members who are happy to interact with you and that sort of thing. But just be comfortable in your own skin and comfortable being alone. And then when you're home, or when you're on your off time or your downtime, you're not seeing folks, hone your skills. Go to a conference, go to an ultrasound clinic, go to a radiology clinic, just do like a wilderness medicine type class. Wilderness medical staffing is great. They do a ATLS once a year, or they've done ATLS.
Yeah, we sure try to.
Well, yeah, a couple of times since I've been with them. So God, if you could get ATLS on board, that would be awesome too. Just be open and be respectful, and realize that not every assignment is for you. And if you think you're a great match for something, and the handler comes back and says, no, we need you to be stronger in this area, don't take it personally. There's other assignments to choose from.
Yeah, great point. Sarah, anything you'd like to add to that?
Mine, just to kind of add to being solo and being isolated, is you got to make sure your mental health is in check, because you can really get in your head when you're by yourself. There's just been only a couple times for just a moment that I almost felt claustrophobic being on an island by myself, just knowing that I can't, it's like opposite, but I can't get out, you know? Right now I'm only an hour plane ride away, but sometimes I'm 3 or 4 hours a plane ride away. And that's just kind of like, if something happened to me, you know, something like that, not just my patients, what am I going to do? But yeah, you got to go into it with something to do, with people to, you know, contact. And another thing you have to think about too is communication. Not every clinic has, or every village has good, you know, cell service. You might have to get a different phone. Sometimes though, you know, the Wi-Fi isn't great. You have to record movies or something on your device before you go there. And there's just a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Doable, but there's a lot to think about.
Yeah, for sure. We've also got, we know that exactly what you were just talking about, Sarah, are things that providers often have questions about. You know, how do I communicate when I get there? What do I need to pack before I get there? All of those kinds of things. So we do have several articles on our website, on our blog, and a lot of them are kind of geared more toward Alaska in specific, just because working there is often very different than working in kind of the lower 48 states. So if you're looking for more in-depth resources, we do have some of those just on our website that you're welcome to always take a look at. Diann, we wanted to kind of circle back to this, but just in making sure providers feel really prepared before they head out on these assignments, can you speak a little bit more about your role or our operation team's roles in really ensuring that providers are ready before we send them out to their first or 17th assignment?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that we really like to do after I speak with a provider and the provider thinks that, you know, I'd really like to do this, and we think, you know, we agree that this is a good match, then we start talking about, you know, what you're going to need. You will need to stop in Anchorage, and you will need to pack a cooler with some groceries, because the store there, you could wind up paying $15 for a half a gallon of milk. Or if they can even get things at the local store, if there is a store in a village. How to dress, that's a big one. I don't know that everyone completely understands how serious the weather can be in Alaska. And being that I lived in Fairbanks for so long, you know, it's serious. It's when temperatures hit 40 and 50 below and you're not dressed properly, you're in trouble within minutes. And I would also say educate yourself. Don't just rely on what you hear from others. Do your own research. Look at our website. We've got some great articles on there that'll help. Ask questions. That's what we're there for as AEs and on our operations team. And believe me, if we don't have the answer, we're going to find the answer for you. So we will always disclose as much as we know. And there is nothing worse than having, someone get out on assignment and they're scared to death. That hasn't happened in a very long time, but, it has happened before where, it's just not a right fit. So we try to avoid that. I think we've gotten better at that the longer we're in this business. And I think we do a pretty darn good job of making people happy, both on the provider side and the client side.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, it has to be a good fit for everyone to kind of ensure success for the whole assignment overall. Okay, now Pete and Sarah, I want to ask this, and then we'll hop into the Q&A portion of all of this. We do have a couple that I've seen getting flagged in the chat, so I'm going to go back and address some of those questions. But what do you find to be the most rewarding about working in remote emergency medicine, especially in rural locations like Alaska? And Sarah, I'll have you take this one first.
Sounds kind of corny, but like brand recognition. After 25 years of working in the ER, EMS, all that stuff, I never got any feedback unless it was, a bad patient satisfaction score. And now I go into these villages, and literally this summer I got off one of the planes, which is, like 4 steps down off the plane. And there's like 4 people that said, "Hey, Sarah, how's it going?" And then, I was like walking down on the dock, taking pictures of the boats. And this 13-year-old girl came up to me and said, "Hi, Sarah, how you doing?" For like a teenager to come see me. And then the the Halloween party, they locked me up in jail. And I was actually one more thing. I was the first person from Wilderness to go to a specific THO. And when I got there, the manager, she said, "I name dropped you again." And she would say, "It's Sarah from Wilderness. They're here." You know what I mean? Like over and over, "It's Sarah from Wilderness." And it was just cool that, they were so excited to have the help. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's cool to be recognized and someone say thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Pete, do you have any kind of rewarding experiences that you'd be able to share with us?
The providers I work with, one of the most rewarding one is in the top left corner, staring at me with bears behind her. I mean, she's one of my best friends. I absolutely loved working with Sarah. The other providers are phenomenal also, and a lot of them come to the solo sites, and I see them every morning on the morning huddle that we have with our medical director and the case manager. Then the medical director that I have now, she's pretty stoic and gives out compliments very, very infrequently. But the CEO of the tribal health organization I'm with is just like, can't rave enough about us. So thank you for your dedication, your loyalty, all the awesome things that you provide to our communities. And he also asks me if I need anything. Almost daily, we'll reach out and say, "Hey, I'm going to Costco. Do you need anything?" And normally he pays for it and he sends it out. I mean, maybe that's not normal, but when you become teacher's pet, he wants to keep you, so I'm very happy with that. The fishing and the berry picking, that's all cool. I mean, we got fresh strawberries and blueberries grow wild out there. The salmon run, and we get to catch the red and silver salmons. Unfortunately, those furry things behind Sarah also like those. So you have to be on the lookout when you go out berry picking and fishing. But
I've got pictures of that too.
Yeah, Sarah has some great pictures of that. Yeah.
Some people pay thousands and thousands of dollars to come up here to some of the communities that we're serving, and we get paid very well to come up here and provide healthcare. And very, very rewarding. I absolutely love it.
That's awesome. Okay, I want to transition to just a couple of the questions that we had come into the chat here. So I'm going to go back to a little bit more previous in the conversation. All right, we had talked a little bit. Diann, you might be the best one for this. How do PAs obtain supervisory agreements when working in Alaska?
That's something that we'll Yeah, that's something that we'll help with. Your operations associate that is assigned to that client will walk you through the process. And it's basically filing with the state. And currently how it is that you'd have a collaborating physician, and then you would have an alternate physician, both signing off on that collaborative agreement. And then there are certain requirements that those physicians are withheld to by the state. But it's actually quite a simple process, and our ops team is very familiar with it, and they make it as painless as possible.
Perfect. And I'll apologize if I don't give people correct credit. Tanner was being kind and kind of flagging some of these, so I kind of looking at a different screen over here. But for Peter, Sarah, have either one of you ever felt unsafe due to issues in the community potentially?
I saw that question. The only time that I communication is my big thing. I have like a satellite communicator and whatnot. It seems silly is that I was out on the four-wheel drive truck and ended up in really, really deep snow, and I couldn't stop. I had to keep going till I could get a place to turn around. It was really, really deep snow. But that, like, as far as like bears and people and everything like that, I don't think I've had any issues with anything like that. So, I mean, I guess I had a bear within like 20 feet of me one day. I didn't know I got out of my car to take a picture of the sunset, which is I broke my own rule and got out of the car, and I thought it was a car coming, and I looked back there. It was a very big bear. So,
yeah, that does pose for
that's normal here.
Any input from you on that, Pete?
I think you might be thinking of something like an unruly patient or something like that. And I've really never come across that because the village I'm in is mostly Department of Transportation, Fish and Wildlife, Federal, or FAA. So we don't have any, I can't say we don't have any, but very few drug issues on the island I'm on, very little alcohol issues. So really nothing that stands out where I was ever physically threatened or felt like I was in danger. Annoyed because somebody who was inebriated kept calling me 3, 4, 5 times overnight, but never in danger, just annoyed.
Yeah, very different. Okay, thanks for that. Okay, it looks like Tim Benson maybe asks here, understanding there's no typical day in the field, but curious to hear about how busy or slow things can get, especially in the more remote, austere settings. What was the busiest or slowest day you've had recently?
Yesterday, I saw 2 people.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's all acuity. Like if you see a patient and they last 29 hours, ended up in a C-130, I mean, that's really a busy day. For me, office-wise, probably 7 patients maybe in a day, 8 to 5.
Our clinic is also open 8 to 5, and I see maybe 2 or 3 people a week. Now, with that, I've been stuck with medevacs. I can't say stuck with. I've been sitting on a medevac for about 20 hours. Got home, an hour later, the phone rang again and said they had another one. And I sat for another 20 hours with that one. It was because of weather or a volcano. I can't remember why they couldn't get out, but really the hours. I'm not overwhelmed with patient care, but man, if you have to sit on somebody for 20 hours who's deteriorating or needs to get out and there's only limited things you can do, it can be a little bit nerve-wracking, but I am not task saturated when I'm at work. I mean, I've maybe seen, like I said, 2 or 3 patients a week in the community I'm in.
Yeah, and I think this question varies very much from assignment to assignment. And we typically even post that, like Diann said, on our position descriptions that are on the website. A lot of times we'll put what the average patient load. If it's not posted, you can always ask, and we can get as much information about that as possible. So you have more of a better idea kind of going into it ahead of time with what your patient load might be for that specific location. Okay, we're going to do one last question before we wrap up. This one is regarding women's health. For men doing women's health, how do you have a chaperone in the room? What are some of these scenarios? What does that look like? Does that happen, I guess?
I don't do it. I don't do women's health. We don't do screening PAPs anymore. And if they do have a GYN issue, then we medevac them out. on a convenience medevac. And someone asked about medevac platforms. We've got the Coast Guard next to us who have Jayhawks. They have a Dolphin. They have C-130 civilian. They have King Air and Learjet.
Sarah, did you have anything to add about the women's health? Do you end up treating that at your clinic or same situation?
I mean, we can't. I mean, like minor stuff. I mean, like regular, PAPs and stuff like that. We can do those and send them. Anything that's a procedure, we don't do, and anything that was an emergency, we would just medevac.
Sounds good. Okay.
Deanna,
yeah,
I think it's maybe having Pete and Sarah speak about pregnant mothers.
Yeah.
How they're handled in the villages.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, sure. Feel free to chime in, guys.
They go to Anchorage at 36 weeks and they stay in housing there until they deliver. Just awesome.
Yeah, very different than a lot of places.
That's if they have established that they are not a traumatic pregnancy or they're not a problem pregnancy. If they're a problem pregnancy, they'll go in earlier than that.
Yeah.
Try not to deliver out in the field.
Yeah. Okay. I've got one last question for all of you. What advice would you give to healthcare professionals considering their first locum tenens assignment in a rural or remote area in Alaska? Pete, why don't you go first?
Come out and come to the THO that I work with. They will not send you out there and set you up for failure. We will do a 3-day handoff. I can teach you everything that you need to know in about 40 minutes, but we would get some time to hang out, get to know the area, and get everything all put in a row so that you miss nothing, and you'll get some great experience if you come out here.
Awesome. What about you, Sarah?
He's going to answer that all in Seinfeld quotes or memes. So know your limitations and hard nose professionally and personally.
That's a good one.
You don't think you want to do it, you don't want to do it. That's just like your gut instinct. If it seems bad, don't do it. When Diann talked to me, no, we're not going to do that. And some of the stuff, I mean, once you work with the account executives, they're going to place you in a really great village or whatnot. I mean, can you manage a code by yourself? How are your IV skills? What is your peds experience? Because remember, this is the same stuff, same medical stuff you're going to get everywhere. What if someone's hit by a car? Can you do it by yourself? I had one patient, a solo site that probably 5 people couldn't have taken care of at the same time. There was just so much going on. You're doing that, you're registering, you're making phone calls. It's a lot of work. But there's a lot of downtime too. I mean, there's so many benefits to it. You got to know what you're okay doing.
Mm-hmm. Diann, did you have any final thoughts real fast before we wrap it up here?
I would encourage anybody that thinks they want to work in Alaska to really heavily investigate it with us. Our recruiters are always happy to talk to you. Please call and they'll give you some great information. It isn't for everybody, but please know that we've got your back. That we're never going to put you in a situation where you're beyond your skills. As a matter of fact, what we would do is ramp you up. Maybe you start at a facility where you're working with multiple providers and you are getting that emergency experience in a remote clinic, but you're not alone. You've got backup. And then you work up to the level where Sarah and Pete are working. And, and please don't forget to, consistently check our website. We do a lot of business in Alaska, but we staff primary care clinics and school-based clinics and critical access hospitals in the lower 48 as well. So, we've got a good variety of positions. So encourage you to take a look and give us a call. Yeah,
that's exactly right. Thanks so much, Diann. One thing that I wanted to close with, along with just thanking all of you for joining us today and sharing your valuable insights, is that we just want to remind everyone who joined us here today that we're here to support you in your journey into locum tenens work in Alaska and beyond. If you're interested in learning more about WMS or want to explore opportunities, like Diann said, you can find jobs on our website. You're welcome to sign up for our newsletter. subscribe to our job alerts, follow us on social media, or read our blog at wildernessmedicalstaffing.com. For those of you who attended live in person today, within the next few minutes, you'll receive a quick survey from us. For taking it, you'll be entered to win a $50 REI gift card, and then we'll select one winner who took the survey entirely as a thank you. So one person out of those who take it may be qualified to get that gift card. So we really appreciate the feedback. It helps us to continue delivering webinars like this one. We really appreciate it. And that's our webinar for today. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you all taking the time out on this Thursday. And with that, we'll go ahead and sign off. Thanks, everyone. Bye.